Welcome to the Allison Knows podcast. Today, we are taking a deep dive into understanding and overcoming narcissistic abuse.
I think it's something that a lot of our listeners are going to really relate to. And,
Yeah,
it can be such a difficult topic to even wrap your head around.
it really can. And that's why I'm so glad that we're diving into Shahida Ravi's book today, Becoming the Narcissist's Nightmare. Because it's not just about, surviving this kind of abuse. It's about actually thriving afterwards.
Yeah. And I think that's what sets this book apart.
Yes.
It doesn't just tell you what narcissistic abuse is. It actually gives you the tools to dismantle it, to reclaim your power.
Exactly. And we'll be weaving in other sources too. Personal accounts, research, all kinds of perspectives to really give you a well-rounded understanding.
Yeah, because knowledge is power.
Right.
The more you understand about what you're dealing with, the better equipped you are to actually break free.
Absolutely. So think of this deep dive as your personal roadmap out of the darkness and into the light.
I like that, a roadmap, because it really is a journey.
It is.
And speaking of darkness, I think it's important to first shed some light on what we're actually dealing with here.
Okay.
What exactly is narcissistic abuse? Because it's not just someone being selfish or difficult. It's a very specific pattern of behavior with really devastating consequences.
Right. It's not just a bad relationship. It's something far more insidious.
Exactly.
So before we even get into the how-to, let's define the what.
Okay.
And Shahida Ravi really lays it out clearly. She starts by talking about narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. So let's start there.
All right. NTD. It's a clinically recognized condition, and it's at the core of this abuse.
So this isn't just someone having a bad day. Their brain is literally wired differently.
Exactly. And the DSM-5, which is like the encyclopedia of mental health conditions, it lists specific criteria for NPD, things like a grandiose sense of self-importance, a constant need for admiration, and a lack of empathy.
Wow.
So, they may seem charming on the surface, but underneath it's all about maintaining that inflated sense of self, even if it means tearing others down.
So that's NPD. But how does that actually translate into abuse?
Well, the abuse stems from the narcissist's need to control and manipulate, to feed their ego. They create a world where they're always right, always superior, and everyone else is just a pawn in their game.
It's like their own little kingdom, where they're the ruler.
Exactly. And they do this through a very specific cycle of abuse that Arabi outlines so brilliantly in her book.
This is where things start to get really scary. And I think a lot of people listening are probably going to have some aha moments as we break this down. Because you might not even realize you're in this cycle until you see it spelled out.
Right. It's so insidious because it often starts so subtly. The first stage is called idealize, and it's all about love bombing.
Love bombing. That sounds kind of nice, actually. What's wrong with a little extra love?
Well, the problem is it's not real love. It's a tactic.
Right.
The narcissist showers you with attention, compliments, gifts, makes you feel like you're the most special person in the world. They're mirroring your interests, feeding your ego, creating this perfect illusion of a soulmate connection.
So it's like they're creating this perfect, shiny trap.
Exactly. And once you're hooked, that's when the devaluation stage begins. The mask starts to slip, the criticisms creep in, the attention becomes inconsistent. Suddenly you can't do anything right.
Oh, gosh.
You're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to please them, but nothing is ever good enough.
And I imagine this is where the self-doubt really starts to creep in. You start questioning your own reality, thinking maybe you're the problem.
That's exactly what the narcissist wants. They need you off balance, questioning yourself, so they can maintain their position of power.
That's so manipulative.
It is. And then comes the discard stage, which is often the most brutal.
This is the part where they just disappear.
Often, yes. It can be abrupt, without explanation. They may have already lined up their next supply, someone else to idealize and devalue, and you're left feeling abandoned, confused, heartbroken. It's like you never even mattered.
Yeah, it's just cruel. But hold on, there are 2 more stages in this cycle?
Yes. Sometimes the discard is followed by the destroy stage. This is where the narcissist actively tries to damage your reputation, sabotage your relationships, or even threaten your safety.
Wow.
They want to leave you completely broken.
That's just evil. And the final stage is Hoover. That sounds oddly domestic for something so sinister.
Right. Hoover, like the vacuum cleaner. And that's exactly what it is, an attempt to suck you back in,
All right.
even after discarding you. The narcissist might reach out with apologies, promises to change, declarations of love. It's all a manipulation to regain control.
So it's like they can't stand the thought of you escaping their grasp,
I
even
don't
if they were the ones who pushed you away.
Exactly. It's all about their ego, their need for power.
This is heavy stuff. It's no wonder people feel so trapped in these relationships. It's like a psychological and emotional roller coaster designed to keep you disoriented and dependent.
And here's the thing. Even when you intellectually understand this cycle, there's something deeper going on that makes it so hard to break free.
What is that?
It's something called the trauma bond.
Okay, let's unpack this. Trauma bond sounds pretty intense. What's happening here?
It's actually a physiological and psychological response to the abuse cycle itself. Think of it like this. The narcissist's intermittent reinforcement, that back and forth between love bombing and devaluation, creates a powerful chemical cocktail in your brain.
Like a drug.
Exactly. You get hits of dopamine, the pleasure hormone, during the idealization phase. Then when the devaluation hits, your body pumps out adrenaline, the stress hormone. And all of this gets tied up with oxytocin, the bonding hormone that's released during intimacy.
So even though you're being abused, your brain is getting these chemical rewards that keep you hooked.
It's a cruel trick of biology, but understanding it is the first step to breaking free.
Wow.
And Shahida Arabi gives us some incredible tools to do just that. But before we get into those, I think it's important to talk about the long-term impact this kind of abuse can have on your brain. Because it's not just emotional, it's physical.
Right. We can't just brush this off as a bad relationship. This stuff changes your brain chemistry.
It does. And one of the things Arabi talks about is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD.
CPTSD.
This isn't the same as PTSD from a single traumatic event. It's a response to ongoing chronic abuse.
So like being in a war zone with no end in sight?
That's a good analogy. And CPTSD can manifest in so many ways. Anxiety, depression, flashbacks, nightmares, difficulty regulating emotions, even physical health problems.
Wow.
It's like your nervous system is constantly on high alert, stuck in fight or flight mode.
Okay. Before we go any further, I want to remind everyone listening that if this is hitting close to home, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And there is hope. Recovery is possible. We'll be talking about specific strategies later on.
Absolutely. Knowing what you're dealing with is the first step.
And for those of you who are finding this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode so we can reach as many people as possible. You can also join Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube for more insightful deep dives.
Now, let's move on to something that I think will really resonate with a lot of you. The real-life stories in Shahida Arabi's book. Because sometimes hearing other people's experiences can be the most powerful validation that you're not alone in this.
Right. It's one thing to talk about MPD and the abuse cycle in theory. But when you hear these real-life accounts, it becomes so much more real, so much more visceral.
Yeah, and one of the common threads that runs through these stories is the feeling of isolation. The narcissist gaslighting and manipulation make you question your own sanity. They twist reality to fit their narrative, leaving you feeling like you're going crazy.
One story that really struck me was about a woman named Sarah, who was systematically isolated from her friends and family by her narcissistic partner. He controlled their finances, constantly belittled her, and by the time she left, she was a shadow of her former self. It's heartbreaking.
Sarah's story is a classic example of how insidious this abuse can be. It often starts so subtly, with seemingly small put-downs and manipulations, that it's hard to recognize it for what it is.
Another powerful story was about a woman named Lily, who described how her narcissistic ex used love bombing and gaslighting to completely control her. She lost her sense of self, her financial stability, and it took her years to recover.
It's devastating.
And her story highlights how this isn't just about romantic relationships. It can happen in families, friendships, even workplaces.
That's right. Wherever there's a power dynamic, a narcissist can exploit it. But the good news is, all of these survivors, they found a way to heal and reclaim their lives.
And that's what we're going to dive into next, the strategies for recovery. Because even though this is heavy stuff, there is a way out.
There is, absolutely.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break.
All right. You know, it's really inspiring, isn't it? Seeing how resilient the human spirit can be, even in the face of, such profound darkness.
It really is. And that's what gives me hope, knowing that even after going through something as devastating as narcissistic abuse, you can come out on the other side, stronger, wiser, and more empowered. But let's get practical. Where do you even begin to heal from this kind of trauma?
Well, Shahida Arabi provides a roadmap. And one of the first and most crucial steps she emphasizes is establishing no contact.
No contact. That sounds pretty straightforward.
Hmm.
But I imagine it's a lot harder to put into practice than it sounds, especially when you're dealing with that trauma bond we were talking about.
You're absolutely right. It's not easy. It means completely cutting off all communication with the narcissist. No calls, texts, emails, social media interactions. It means blocking them on every platform and avoiding any place where you might run into them.
So basically, you're going off the grid as far as they're concerned.
Exactly. And as you can imagine, this is often met with resistance. Narcissists don't like losing their supply. They might try to guilt you, manipulate you, even threaten you to get back in contact.
So how do you stay strong in the face of that? Because I know for a lot of people, their instinct is to try to reason with the narcissist, to make them understand.
I understand that impulse, but it's important to remember that any interaction, even negative attention, just feeds the narcissist's ego and reignites the abuse cycle. No contact is about starving the beast. It's about depriving them of the attention and validation they crave. So you can finally break free and start focusing on your own healing.
That makes sense. But what about situations where no contact isn't possible? Like if you have children together or share a workplace.
That's where the gray rock method comes
The
in.
gray rock method.
It's a technique where you essentially become emotionally unresponsive to the narcissist.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this gray rock method.
Think of yourself as a smooth, gray rock on a beach. Uninteresting. Unreactive. You keep your interactions with the narcissist limited to absolutely essential matters, and your responses are brief, factual, unemotional. You don't engage in their drama. You don't try to explain yourself. You don't feed their need for attention.
So you're basically becoming a giant snooze fest to the narcissist.
Precisely. And over time, they'll likely lose interest and move on to easier targets for their manipulations.
This is brilliant. I can see how these techniques can really help to create some distance and protect yourself from further abuse. But even with no contact in gray rock, there's still the internal work to be done.
Right.
Healing those deep emotional wounds.
Absolutely. And this is where self-care becomes your most powerful weapon.
Okay. Self-care. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot these days. But what does it actually look like in the context of healing from narcissistic abuse?
It's about prioritizing your own well-being, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's about nurturing yourself, rebuilding your self-esteem, and finding healthy coping mechanisms for the pain and trauma you've experienced.
So it's more than just bubble baths and face masks, although I'm a big fan of those too.
Yes, it's about so much more than that. It's about rediscovering who you are outside of the relationship, reconnecting with your passions, rebuilding your support system, and finding ways to regulate your nervous system.
So what are some specific self-care practices that Shahida Arabi recommends in the book?
She covers a wide range, but some of the key ones are exercise, mindfulness, and reparenting the inner child. Exercise is incredibly powerful for releasing those pent-up stress hormones and boosting those feel-good endorphins.
I can definitely attest to that. Whenever I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, a good workout always helps me to clear my head and feel more grounded.
Exactly. And mindfulness practices, like meditation or deep breathing, can help you to regulate your emotions and calm your nervous system. It's about learning to be present in the moment, rather than getting caught up in those anxious thought patterns.
I can see how that would be so helpful, especially when you're dealing with the aftermath of trauma and your mind is constantly replaying those painful memories.
What about reparenting the inner child? I've heard that term before, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
It's a beautiful practice of connecting with that younger part of yourself who may have experienced neglect or trauma and offering them the love, validation, and support they didn't receive back then.
So it's like giving yourself the nurturing you didn't get as a child. Precisely. It's about healing those deep-seated wounds and building a stronger sense of self-worth.
That's so powerful. It's like you're rewriting the narrative of your past, giving yourself a second chance at a happy childhood. Are there any other tools or techniques that Arabi recommends for self-care?
She also talks about EFT, or emotional freedom technique, which is a form of energy healing that involves tapping on specific meridian points on the body while focusing on negative emotions or beliefs.
Oh yeah, EFT. I've seen videos of people doing that. It looks a little strange. But I've heard it can be really effective. How does it work?
It's based on the idea that our emotions are connected to our energy systems. And when those systems get blocked or disrupted, it can lead to emotional and physical distress. Tapping on these meridian points is thought to help to release those blockages and restore balance to your energy flow.
It's like acupuncture for your emotions.
That's a great way to put it. And Arabi also emphasizes the importance of building a strong support system. Surround yourself with people who understand what you've been through, who validate your experiences, and who support your healing journey.
That's so important because I imagine it can be really hard to talk about this kind of abuse with people who haven't experienced it firsthand. They might minimize it, try to rationalize the narcissist's behavior, or even blame you.
That's unfortunately very common, and that's why it's crucial to find your tribe, those people who get it, who
Mhm.
believe you, and who hold space for your healing.
This is all so incredibly helpful. I'm feeling so much more hopeful just hearing about all these tools and techniques. It's like there's an entire arsenal at our disposal for fighting back against this kind of abuse and reclaiming our power.
That's exactly the mindset we need to cultivate. It's not about dwelling in victimhood. It's about embracing your strength, your resilience, and your capacity for healing.
And speaking of strength and resilience, what does Shahida Rabi say about dealing with the narcissists themselves? Is there any hope for them to change?
It's a question that a lot of survivors grapple with. And while it's natural to hope that the narcissist will have a change of heart, Arabi cautions against holding on to that expectation.
So you're saying there's not much hope for the narcissist to actually become a better person?
Narcissists are deeply resistant to change. Their entire sense of self is built on maintaining that facade of superiority and control. Admitting fault or taking responsibility would shatter that carefully constructed image.
That's a tough pill to swallow, especially if you still have feelings for them or if you have to co-parent with them. So if we can't change them, what's the best way to deal with them?
Arabi's advice is to become the narcissist's nightmare.
Okay, now we're talking. That sounds both terrifying and incredibly badass. What does that look like in practice?
It means becoming indifferent to their manipulations. It means refusing to engage in their games. It means building a life so fulfilling and joyful that they become irrelevant.
So it's not about revenge. It's about rising above their toxicity and creating a life that's so good they can't touch it.
Exactly. Remember, narcissists thrive on attention, whether positive or negative. By becoming indifferent, you're taking away their power source.
This is so empowering. It's like you're flipping the script, taking back control of the narrative. But I imagine it takes a lot of strength and resilience to get to that point.
It does. But Arabi's book is filled with stories of survivors who have done just that. They've broken free from the narcissist's control,
Yeah.
healed their wounds, and created lives filled with joy, authenticity, and purpose.
And that's what I want to emphasize here. They're at IS Hope. They're IS Healing. You are not alone in this. And there are so many resources available to support you on your journey.
Absolutely. And if you're finding this information valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might benefit from it. You can also join Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube for more insightful deep dives.
Yes, and we'll be back to talk about some of the specific strategies for becoming the narcissist nightmare and reclaiming your power.
Sounds good.
So welcome back to the Allison Knows podcast.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey exploring, the complexities of narcissistic abuse.
It really has, and I hope that by now you're starting to see that. Even though this type of abuse can be incredibly damaging, you're not powerless. There are ways to reclaim your strength and build a life free from its grip.
Absolutely.
And Shahida Rabi's book, Becoming the Narcissist's Nightmare, really lays out a powerful path for doing just that. We've talked about no contact, the gray rock method, the importance of self-care. But I'm eager to dive deeper into this idea of becoming the narcissist's nightmare. What does that look like on a practical effort?
Well, it's about understanding what truly terrifies a narcissist. Your indifference and your success, they thrive on control, on feeling like they have power over you. So when you take that power back, when you show them that you're not affected by their manipulations anymore, that's when you become a force to be reckoned with.
It's not about stooping to their level,
Right.
playing their games. It's about rising above it all.
Exactly. It's about shifting your focus from them to you. It's about investing your energy into your own healing, your own growth, your own happiness. The more you focus on building a fulfilling life for yourself, the less power the narcissist has over you.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective, and I think it speaks to the core of what Arabi is trying to convey, that you're not a victim, you're a warrior. You faced a formidable foe and emerged stronger on the other side.
Yes. And this strength isn't about becoming, cold or heartless. It's about setting healthy boundaries, protecting your energy, and choosing to engage with people and experiences that uplift and empower you.
So practically speaking, what are some things listeners can do to start embodying this, narcissist nightmare energy?
First and foremost, it's about internal work. It's about healing those wounds that made you vulnerable to narcissistic abuse in the first place. This might involve therapy, self-help practices, journaling, whatever resonates with you.
I imagine it's also about rebuilding your self-esteem, rediscovering those parts of yourself that might have been dimmed or silenced during the relationship.
Exactly. It's about remembering who you are, what you're passionate about, what brings you joy. It's about reclaiming your voice, your power, your authenticity.
And what about dealing with the narcissist directly? Especially in situations where no contact isn't completely possible, how do you navigate those interactions?
It goes back to the gray rock method. Be brief, factual, unemotional. Don't give them any fuel for their fire. And remember, you don't have to explain yourself or justify your actions. You are under no obligation to engage in their drama.
It's like you're creating an invisible shield around yourself, deflecting their negativity, protecting your energy.
That's a great way to put it. And as you start to embody this new energy, you might find that the narcissist loses interest. They'll realize that they can't manipulate you anymore, and they'll likely move on to easier targets.
That's such a satisfying thought. So becoming the narcissist's nightmare isn't about seeking revenge. It's about reclaiming your power and living a life so full of joy and purpose that they become a distant memory.
Exactly. It's about focusing on your own growth, your own happiness, your own future. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, not despite the abuse, but because of it.
And isn't that the ultimate victory?
Absolutely. It's about taking something that was meant to destroy you and using it as fuel for your transformation.
This has been such an incredibly powerful and insightful conversation, and I hope our listeners are feeling a sense of hope and empowerment. I know I am.
I do too. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never give up on your healing.
If you're resonating with this episode, please do us a favor and like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who might need to hear this message. You can also join Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube for more insightful deep dives.
Yes, and remember, you are not alone. There is help available, and you deserve to live a life free from abuse.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into narcissistic abuse. Remember, you are stronger than you think, and you have the power to create a beautiful future for yourself.
And remember, the narcissist's worst nightmare is a thriving, joyful, empowered you. So go out there and be your own superhero.
Thank you for listening to the Allison Knows podcast. Follow Allison on Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok.